How are y'all?
Good.
Good. Christy, thank you. And first of all, a little round of applause for Christy and BalancedComp. Amazing job. So we've gotten to know Christy over the last couple of years. We partnered with her this year. And so thank you for allowing us to come and be a part of this. Love it. And when I was talking with Christy and she said, y'all want to come be a part? I said, absolutely. She goes, well, if you come, you got to bring it because this isn't a boondoggle. This is a working conference. So this is going to be really boring. This is all going to be about takeaways for y'all. Now, how many in here, I'm just curious, how many credit unions do we have in here? Okay. How many organizations in here are either thinking about selling or buying somebody? Have you had any strategic discussions about that?
We're doing it right now.
I'm doing it right now. So this is relevant. Well, depending on where you are, this may or may not be relevant because you may already have done all this stuff, okay? But for those that are thinking about or that either selling or buying, okay? Or those that are looking to even grow, M&A is a great opportunity for you as an organization to pick up talent, to, not just lenders, but, all throughout, compliance, BSA, IT, there's all sorts of opportunities that come out of M&A transactions. Now, little housekeeping item before we even get started. Christy mentioned it, Dr. Cherry mentioned it, HR, and it's just my opinion, y'all have been forgotten in large over the last 70 years, okay? It's kind of stuck in the corner. Y'all haven't been at the table as, Christy and Dr. Cherry said. And what I find really interesting is there's a great interview out there by this individual by the name of Bill McDermott. And if you don't know who that is, he was the CEO of SAP. He took over SAP when it was, 35 billion in market cap. He left when it was 165 billion in market cap. But there's a great interview. And if you want, I'll find it. You can probably Google it, YouTube it. And it was about 25, 30 minutes. I think it was about 10 years ago. But he said he does not make a strategic decision, without his chief human resource officer sitting by his side every time, hands down. And they asked him why. He said it's because the people make the difference. You have to have the right people, the right training, the right execution. If you don't have that, M&A is not going to work, lift outs aren't going to work, right? New vertical opportunities aren't going to work. So he recognized the value of having that human resource touch, sitting at a strategic discussion with everything he did. Now, banking by and large, and credit unions to some degree, they're a little bit behind the times on their thought process, right? And it's not because of the people sitting in this room, it's because of the CEOs and the boards, right? And if anybody's ever gone to a OBA, acquire or be acquired, there's a little bank record conference, you'll notice that there's a bunch of old white men walking around. And they all think the exact same. It's terrible. Now, there are a number of organizations that are thinking differently, right? And y'all being here, y'all going to help your organization do that. So my goal today, right, and I'm blessed to be here, and I don't take this lightly because I know your time's incredibly valuable. My goal today is just to give you one idea to take back. That's it. If you take back one idea that makes your organization better as it relates to an M&A transaction or gives you an opportunity to capitalize on that, that's a win for me. So, and if I don't do that, roast me. All right. Now, here are the topics that we're going to discuss today. And I want to start out with M&A trades, okay? And our friends at Olson Palmer gave us some slides. And here's what I want to share with you. Most HR departments in general are not brought in to any type of investment banking conversations. Is that a fair statement? Okay? So typically y'all are told what to do as opposed to being brought in to saying, here's the marketplace. So here's one idea for you. Bring in, and Olson Palmer, Stiefel, Hovde, there's dozens of investment bankers. Well, bring in a group, sit down with your department and say, look, we want you to spend some time with us. Now, you probably can't do that with going and talking to your CEO or somebody to say, this is what we want to do, okay? But knowledge is power, particularly when it comes to M&A. You need to understand what the landscape is because that's going to help position you in the marketplace, okay? Now, these are going to be 3 or 4 slides. I'm not an investment banker by any means, but this is the kind of information that I think is very relevant to your industry. So back over here in the 1990 to 15,000 banks, today we got 4,800 banks. You see this gold bar here? Those are all the de novo charters that happened. right? You see the de novo charters over here? Very few, right? What does that tell you for the talent that's coming in and or being developed in the industry, right? It's all compressed. So, this is a great slide to sit down with your executives to say, look, we have more pressure on our talent than ever before, right? And then with Christy's data and what she brings to the table, again, it's about building a story for your executives to understand what you're dealing with. Now, when we start talking about the rate of consolidation, now again, you have to understand this is done by investment bankers, so of course they're going to show this going up, right? There's going to be more consolidation, but the reality is, I believe that, and I think everybody in here believes that, right? I've spent 4 weeks in DC this year listening to the regulators and all the lobbying that was done, and it's a mess. And if you don't get bigger, the amount of regulation that's about to come down on y'all is unbelievable. It's going to be more expensive. So I believe we're going to see consolidation increase. Now again, there's some opportunities with that. Now, let's talk about bank valuations for a minute. This is really interesting. This impacts compensation. So if we go back a number of years, and I say number of years, if you look at pre-2008, okay, most executives loved equity. Now I'm not saying executives don't love equity now, okay, but they loved equity. Why? Well, these are the median. This is where 50% make more or less. You had median of 2 times book, right? The average, right? If you start looking at the average, is closer to 3 times in some of the geographical areas. Okay, that was very attractive if I had equity because I'm making a lot of money. Well, now what are my multiples? 126. Well, that's not nearly as attractive. So the way compensation is being driven at the executive level has also changed. There's been less emphasis on equity, believe it or not, and more on deferred compensation. Okay, now it doesn't mean equity's gone away, it just means they're balancing it. Now on that note, there are some great studies. One of them is from Frederick Tung and Sue Wang. Tung is T-U-N-G, Sue Wang is X-U-E-W-A-N-G. Sue's out of the Emory School of Law, the Emory School of Business. Tung was out of the Boston School of Law. They did a great study after the downturn on talking about the value of equity versus deferred comp. I'm not going to go into it, but just know banks, and it was specific to banks that had higher what they call debt to equity ratios, meaning higher deferred comp to equity ratios, performed better during the downturn than banks that had higher equity debt to debt ratios. It's a very, very interesting study. Harvard Business Review also did a study on that. But we can see that this is, going forward, there's been a tremendous emphasis on deferred compensation. Again, just talking about trends, trying to keep it high level. This gives you an idea of the number of transactions that are happening. This was back from, last trailing 12 from March 31, 2024. Again, gives you an idea where some of the consolidation is happening. Now, there's some reasons behind this, okay? And that's because if you look at the interstate banking laws and if you look at the county branching laws, some states were late to adopt some of those, okay? And so you look at Illinois, Iowa, for example, was late. Georgia was actually late to that. So there was a lot of, if you look at the number of banks in the various states, okay, Illinois has one of the largest bank populations in the country, okay? So, but again, talking about, what state you're in, what's happening in the state, how are those transactions happening, how many's going on, this would be good for y'all to know as an HR department because you're dealing with talent, okay? So bring in an investment banker and, even if it's once a year, just to kind of give you a lay of the land, I think that's really good to have a relationship with it. Now, why is all this important? Because a lot falls on the HR department when we start talking about mergers and acquisitions, okay? Y'all have about a zillion things to do. And if you look here, if you're under $1 billion, if you look at the close time, you're now down to 135 days. If 1 to 10 billion, you're down to about 180 days. So you have between 4 and 6 months to get all this stuff done.
Now, is that bank to bank or credit union bank?
So this is just the average deal time to close across the board. Okay, now,
so it includes all of it.
It does, but bank or credit union to bank is taking longer. Right? A lot longer. Okay?
What's the starting point?
What's the starting point?
Green light,
Once the deal's announced. Okay? So, but again, bank to bank is going to move a lot quicker.
Sure.
Right? But, you're going to have about 4 to 6 months, most banks, to handle the consolidation process. Okay, that's a lot, by the way, that you have to handle in a short period of time. Now, you mentioned credit unions. Here's the X factor in all of this. Credit unions are now buying banks. Now, tremendous complication as it relates to this. And I will tell you, after being in D.C., credit unions are beloved by D.C., and we understand why. There's credit unions in the capital. However, there's a lot of chirping going on right now that you have a tax-exempt entity buying a taxable entity, and that's causing some heartache long term. So just be prepared that there's going to be some things that come down the pike. Now, I will tell you, from a mechanic standpoint, if you are a credit union buying a bank, when we start talking about executive benefits, it becomes a disaster. Executive benefits and credit unions work vastly different than credit unions and banks. So if you are a bank thinking about getting acquired by a credit union, call somebody before you even go down that path. And if you're a credit union buying a bank, make sure you understand what's going to happen. Because again, the plans that are typically designed in banks, they cannot operate in the same manner in credit unions, right? It's for-profit versus non-profit, okay? All right, I'm going to hit pause there. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
I'm just curious about if you had any information on asset sizes that are emerging. Are they the 400 to 600, or are they the, do you have any idea? I was curious to know.
I didn't put those slides in here, but yes, we have all that kind of information. I would tell you, particularly in Georgia, okay, we are seeing banks, they're trying to scale up, or credit unions. So most of the transactions are $1 billion and under, okay?
And I was curious also, since credit unions don't give equity, right? They're not, I don't think, do the executives don't get equity? If a credit union is buying a bank, they don't get equity, do they?
Correct. There's no equity to give. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. And
That's
so
right.
do you have any idea on if they're doing something else instead, or are they truly just doing it for the betterment of their member?
No, they're not doing it for the betterment of the member.
Are they doing it to make money, or?
Bingo. They're doing it to get bigger.
Hold on, let's have that conversation.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to be rude by that, but yeah,
because we know as credit unions, if we're not growing, we're dying.
100%.
So we can't benefit our member if we're not growing to scale. Sorry. Can we go back
Sure.
to the slide where you're talking about equity and deferred comp? Because that's where you were losing me just a little bit. Can we come back? Because when you're talking about equity, you really are talking about ownership of the business, correct? So
Correct.
when you're talking about how this trend is working in deferred comp, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding what you mean
Sure.
by equity. So can you explain this again? So, because we're really talking about, so go back to this slide again. So we understand that equity, when we're talking about equity is ownership in the business, correct?
Correct.
Versus what you say is deferred compensation, or how we would do that. So
That's right.
if we understand when you say equity, I want to better understand what you're talking about in this slide.
Yeah. So, for example, if I had an individual over here that, and we're going to use a 2x book, okay, for an example, and I had an executive come on board and I gave him, $100,000, right? When I sold that company, okay, it'd be worth $200,000.
Right.
Okay? So today, if I give $100,000, I'm going to get $125,000. Okay? So that's just kind of the average.
Okay.
Okay, or excuse me, the median.
As relating to the purpose of this slide is when you're talking equity to that owner.
Equity to the executives.
The executives.
That's right.
The
Exactly.
boards and
It's based on
executives, credit
tangible
unions.
book value, not stock price. They're two
Bingo.
different
Correct.
things.
That's right.
Correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
But
Okay.
I'm assuming usually there's some vesting period in that as well too.
Yeah, and again, we didn't get into all the vesting. This is just kind of keeping it high level to say, what banks are selling at today is a lot less than what they sold at 15, 20 years ago. And so the value placed in equity by the executives has been diminished. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at some point in time, to be fair, the scarcity value should come back. Okay? Because a charter is going to be worth more money if there's less charters in the market. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, I think there's going to be a reversal here. I don't know when it is, okay? But there's going to be some things coming on here that's going to shake this up a little bit. Is that fair?
It is.
Okay. And I didn't mean to say they didn't.
No.
Well, I'm sensitive to that, okay? But, you know, again, where I've seen the credit unions, just quite honestly, and I understand if they're not growing, they're dying, but, you know, they're making a lot of money. And, you know, they're doing things in the community and pouring it back into, you know, sponsorships and all sorts of different things.
Yeah, but it also allows us to give higher rates on CDs, rates on return and things like that, because it impacts our cost of funds.
100%.
And so when we're able to operate more efficiently, then we give that back to the membership.
That's right.
We're not paying, yeah, we can have that debate. But
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, now, let's go through the average M&A process, okay? Now again, this is in general. I know I was talking with a young lady this morning, and you know, she said, well, that's not how it works at our bank. We're involved very early in the process. I said, that's great. I said, but our experience is you're typically not, okay? So here's typically the process. You got an iBanker that's got an idea, and they go, yay, they go talk to the executive, and they go, hey, I think you need to talk with this executive over there. So they get together. And the HR's not involved in that. And then they go, you know what, we need our chairmans involved. So the chairmans come together, right? And the CEOs come together and go, man, this is a great idea. We want to do this. And then it's okay. You know, we have all these investment bankers who got all these numbers, okay? Now, here's a little dirty secret. Most of them are estimated at best, right? WAGs, okay? Wild guesses, okay? I'm not going to say the middle word. So, you know, so there's a lot of estimates in these projections. And then what happens, okay? Everybody gets excited about it, and then they go, oh, by the way, you know what? Probably would be a good time to bring the HR in at this point in time, right? And so here's what you have at the end of the day. We have fragmented leadership because nobody knows what's going on, right? There's zero communication, or it's unclear, right? Because you don't know, they've been talking maybe for 6, 8, 12 months. You don't know about any of this. It's dumped on you, right? Now, silence amongst your employees and rumors, what does that equal? Bad news, right? I'm going to lose my job, world's coming to an end. And so there's no story. Again, y'all are removed, okay? Now, we talked about HR being a strategic position in the conversation. So what I want to do today is I want to lay out a few things that will help you maybe reposition with your executives, right? Where they go, that's really good. We might need to think about that. Now, you bring value to them and they see a different perspective on what you do. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not saying don't bring value. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But when we start talking about executives, and I love them, okay? But it's about really what impacts them. Is that a fair statement? Okay? I mean, look, you know, we're just going to be real for a minute, okay? So here's some things I think you can do that will change the dynamic of the conversation, okay? Now, number one, census information. This is so classic. This is the easiest thing in the world. I can't tell you how many times where, you know, we work with some bigger banks, and they've rolled up 3, 4, 5, 10, 30 different banks over the years, okay? And we start going in and you know, we do deferred compensation and bank-owned life insurance and corporate-owned life, all the things, okay? And to administer that, we need to have the right data points. So we go to the bank or we go to the credit union and say, hey, we need all this data. And they go, great, we don't have it. What do you mean you don't have it? Well, you know, we don't have it. You know, it's from 6 bank transactions ago, and we don't know where some of this stuff is. So here's the first takeaway. It's so basic. Have a file, you know, a repository that is for your M&A. And start once a year, put all the good things on the census in there. Now, this is, you know, look, I'm a sales guy, okay? We have little tickler files that, you know, we try to keep the names of, you know, the kids and the wives and, you know, what they like to do and some of the favorite things they like to go, okay? This is amazing information if you can do that, particularly in M&A, okay? Wouldn't it be cool to know that your favorite, you know, branch manager's, you know, restaurant was Chick-fil-A, and when the merger closes, you send them a little gift certificate to Chick-fil-A and go, hey, lunch is on us today. Thanks for everything that you do. And somebody else gets Starbucks. Somebody else gets, you know, Cane's or whatever. So the little things that you can do in keeping some of this information, it doesn't have to be incredibly detailed, but just little things, your favorite candies, that kind of stuff, right? It's amazing those touches and what happens post M&A transaction if you can just bring a little bit of personal interaction to them, right? All right, now, next, all agreements and contracts. Again, have a repository of this, but this is crazy stuff. And again, this gets fragmented because, again, you have different, things going on, and you have attorneys drafting and different revisions. And again, this gets complex here, okay? But do yourself a favor, right? Have somebody on your team say, here's what your job is. I need every executed employment agreement we have in this folder, right? I need, all our non-competes or non-qualified deferred comp or whatever it is we have. I need a folder, our summary plan documents with our qualified plans. Give it to me, right? Have a place for it because look, when a deal's announced, y'all are running around doing, again, y'all have so much to do. And this is just this is a tiny little corner of all the stuff that has to be done. But if you already have it done, that's a beautiful thing. All right, compensation benefits. Do they jive? Compensation philosophies, just kind of understanding, where are they, where are you? Is it a bigger bank that's buying you? Is it a merger of equals? What's going on? A lot of times, and again, this is where Christy and her team can help you. Get involved early with Christy and her team because more responsibility is going to equal more pay. Yes, ma'am.
I have to blurt in here that sorting through job titles and sorting through who's going to do what, and then
you're jumping
them versus us kind of a mentality,
yeah.
And then they're fighting to keep their title or better it. And so I just wanted to mention that having an outsider do that, I would never, if I wanted a good relationship with an employee, try to do that internally.
No. You need to get Christy involved.
I'm not saying that as a sales thing.
No, I know. You need to get somebody involved to do this because it is a mess, okay? But, again, you have all this other stuff that you have to go through. If and this is really interesting. If anybody ever goes to AOBA, acquire to be acquired, I would encourage everybody to go one time, okay? Or even if you go every 5 years, one of your executives need to go, and you as an HR director need to go. And it's the little things that they're going to share with you. So, look, if you are getting ready to either buy or sell, don't enter into a 10-year core contract, right? I mean, it's common sense, but you know how many banks do that? It's unbelievable. So, and I would argue the same thing on any type of benefits or insurance or all the different other things that go along with all what you do. You want to be careful what contracts you get into if you know an M&A is imminent on one side or the other. Again, back to compensation and benefits, understanding the retention strategies, okay? Are we using equity? Do we have long-term incentives? Do we use deferred compensation? Are we big on profit share? What is it? And again, all this, but having an understanding of what you're doing and having a position where you can sit down at the table with the executive and say, hey, here's all the stuff that we've got to look at. And here's how we operate, and here's how they operate. And board compensation is another one, by the way. I'm not even touch on that, but that's really interesting. The one thing I will touch on the board, it's coming up in a minute. Okay. All right. Key employees. So you mentioned it, job descriptions. So I love this. We have a great bank. They bought a tiny bank in a tiny town in Georgia. It was about a $110 million asset, middle of nowhere. And they had a teller there that had been there a long time, and we're going to call her Jane. And Jane was 72, 74 years old, worked at the bank her entire life. And Jane was a little grumpy, to be fair, but they had her job description was a teller. So they came in and said, look, we love you, but here's the deal, we're trying to make room for other people, and they gracefully exited her out the door. Okay, now, yeah, I heard a ooh. Jane went to Wednesday night Bible study, and there's no gossip at Bible study, I know, but through prayer on her situation, the bank lost a tremendous amount of assets in the community because nobody understood what her job responsibility was, and she was effectively the de facto mayor of everybody loved Jane, right? They didn't know that. So again, going through and having your people, and I'm sure you've done this, right? what's your job responsibility versus job description? You need to know, right? Because people, I promise, are doing things that you don't know what they're doing. This other piece, the key clients and relationships, that's so important, particularly if you're buying somebody else, right? Because there may be a CRM that's tied in whose brother-in-law, has a major business with the bank, and again, you never know how all that ties in. So you just want to have transparency with that, okay? Now, board compensation practices, my one takeaway there is minimum ownership. I really hope, banks have minimum ownership for boards. But anyway, this is important just to kind of understand. And mandatory retirement, this is a big deal, right? To know whether or not there's mandatory retirement on one side or the other. Because if not, it can get super ugly. Now, this is all outside my area, okay? This is HR. I don't know much about it, but I do know this. There are times when there's lawsuits going on and they don't know it as it relates to some arbitration for whatever, right? Unfair pay practices, however that goes. You want to get on the front side of that and understand that. Organizational structure, it's a big deal to understand, how this is, what this is, and how you work as an organization. Again, if you have all this in a nice document and you go to the CEO or you go to the board and say, okay, listen, I know there's some things going on. I know we're thinking about things differently. Here's what we've done as an HR department. Here's our package that you need to be aware of. When you go start talking to somebody, here's all the stuff that you need to know about. Does that make sense? Okay? Again, you're going to get proactive with the board a little bit and help teach them what they think they already know, but they don't know. Okay? All right. I'm going to hit pause there because I know that was a lot. Any questions? No. Okay. Now, here's where I think you can add the most value to any conversation relative to an M&A. And this is related to Internal Revenue Code Section 280G, okay? $49.99 is the excise tax imposed, or maybe I have that reversed. But anyway, everybody talks about 280G. Does anybody know what this is? Everybody know what this is? Okay. I could literally spend an hour just doing this. So boring, it's so dry, we're not doing that. But here's what you need to know. If you have an executive that has an employment contract, that has an equity grant that's going to accelerate in the event of change of control, if they have any type of deferred compensation that's going to get accelerated due to deferred change of control, this is all going to be compiled together and it's going to be wrapped up under 280G. And what does this mean? Here's the deal. If I, as an executive, receive more than 2.99 times my average base compensation, which is defined as my last 5-year W-2 earnings, okay? That's my average. I got to average my last 5-year W-2 earnings. If I get more than 2.99 times that, I've got a problem, okay? Big problem. Now, out of all the M&A transactions that we've been involved in, okay, we've had 6 of our clients get bought recently in the last 18 months. Enter into this. This is the #1 sticking point in all of it. Not core contracts, not loans, not branch closures. What happens to me as the executive? This gets very, very personal. So, what can HR do? First and foremost, you want to make sure you train the executives and board just like your employees as it relates to this issue. We will give you all the ammo you need. Go get an attorney, go get another executive comp consultant, doesn't matter to me. I want y'all to be prepared, and this will bring tremendous value to you as an HR director, as an HR professional. This will bring tremendous value to your bank. Why? Because they need to understand these are the numbers that get estimated by the investment bankers because they don't know all this. And there's some assumptions on how a lot of these plans work. And let me tell you, there could be multi-million-dollar differences between what they assume and what actually happens. Okay? Yes?
Really, I'm a little confused here. If they get more than 2.99 times their average base compensation, there's a problem. And that problem is there's a greater than 20% excise.
Yep. So,
could you explain the problem?
I can. So the problem is so anything in excess of 1 times my base, okay, Anything in excess of 1 times my base, and again, my base is defined as my last 5-year average W-2 earnings, there's a 20% excise tax on. Plus, there's a non-deductibility to the acquirer.
No, you're talking that's in equity. That's if you're talking for profit.
Yes, for profit. Does not apply to credit unions.
Right, and that's important differentiation.
Huge differentiation. That's right.
Isn't there something about any time that an executive is paid more than $1 million a year or something that's not deductible?
That's on the nonprofit side.
That's on the nonprofit
Yes.
side, right?
Yeah.
That's, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Now, this still applies, by the way, if a credit union buys a bank, right? It just doesn't apply to credit union. Okay? So,
I would say that this has been the biggest problem that I've seen when I've done divestitures sold up is exactly what you're talking about is the compensation issue. And maybe you're going to get into this, and maybe I'm looking ahead. But have you found that the biggest issue that I've seen is who owns the employee at the transaction point when they do the purchase? So whoever owns that employee at the time, they're the ones who are going to take responsibility for accrued vacation or whatever that is left out of incentive pay, commissions, things like that. Because when you transfer from one to the other, you're ending one employment relationship and you're starting another. And what I have found is those that have negotiated the contract have not thought about that. And it ends up being much more expensive and who's going to pay it. But the person who owns the employee is the one who's paying it. And that's where I kind of see more of the issue when that happens. Like, do you see that quite often? Because that conversation, to your point, isn't happening early enough to say, hey, this is an expense and who's going to own it?
So that's a great question. Here's how we've always dealt with that, is if the seller is the one that has the contract, the seller picks up the cost. Does that make sense? So it's deducted back from what the purchase price would be.
Which it should be.
100%.
I've seen this is that conversation early on, to your point. So while candy and all that's great and who's a good person, and I think that's wonderful, but if we want to really be valuable, back to that, it's that bottom conversation and these that really show our worth as far as understanding, because it's about dollars and cents and numbers. What is it
100%.
going to cost? And it gets really, really ugly if you don't know who owns who and when.
That's right.
Because who's paying, like you said, who the point is, and sometimes it is the seller and they're gonna buy back, but if they don't have the conversation and if they don't know it exists, then then they get hurt feelings of who owns, and you've gotta go back and forth with attorneys to figure out who's paying what. And that's not what we agreed to.
Look, I agree 100%. Now understand, I'm being very myopic in this because we have one little piece, which is typically the deferred comp component, okay? Okay, but I can tell you, and I agree with you 100%. And again, I love investment bankers, but they are terrible at getting in the details on who is going to pay the dollars. Because here, and I'm going to touch on something real quick, retention bonuses, right? Yeah, there we go. So the question is, who pays those? That's really where you're getting at, right? Is that kind of fair, or amongst other issues?
No, it is,
pop up?
or you're in commissions and hey, we were owned this, and what's considered earned wages and who owns that vacation payout, blah, blah, blah. All that type of stuff that's truly important that messes with that. But you're seeing more of, it's in the contract, the seller will take that into consideration before they do, because I've seen it missed.
Yep, they should 100%, because if I have employees, and we're gonna talk about this in a minute, right? Stay bonuses, okay? You got to have them, right? Because you got to have the right people. That should not be the expense of the buyer. It just shouldn't be, okay? Because it's, if I'm the seller and I've got 100 employees and I know I need, 50 of them to make the transaction whatever the numbers are, right? That's my responsibility to take care of those 50 employees. Is that fair? Okay? So that number ought to be deducted effectively or embedded into the sell contract.
So you're saying stay bonuses until the deal closes, or if there's a need for after the fact,
No,
that would be the buyer's responsibility?
So, well, it would be the buyer responsibility, but it should be embedded within the sell of the contract. Does that make sense? So in other words, if I'm going to pay you $100 for your bank, okay, but hey, I need $1 of that to take care of these people, that dollar may not get paid out until 6 months after the transaction closes, because I need everybody to stick around, right? So you can get a stay bonus, but that should all be embedded inside the contract.
And is all that stuff not uncovered until after they've said we want to get married?
Bingo.
There you go.
And this goes back to the very beginning. HR is kept out of it.
That's why. And it's like, oh, I didn't know your credit score was that, and you owe that much money? Huh.
There's a lot of truth to that. So again, and this is all, look, and I'm not picking on anybody because we get stuff wrong. Everybody gets stuff wrong, okay? But at the very beginning of the day, and this is where I again, and it's Virginia, is that right? Yep. This is where Virginia's spot on, right? The executives have to be involved with HR, and the HR has to be involved with executives on these strategic discussions, particularly when it relates to M&A, okay? 100%. Now, let's talk about retaining some of the key people as it relates to M&A, okay? Now, here, I'm a believer in this. Every compensation package. Now, when I say every, I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about rank and file. And look, we all have the ABCD players, okay? You need some people that come in and dig the ditch and clock in, clock out, okay? I get that, okay? But for those that are valuable to your organization, every one of those individuals needs to have an at-risk component in their compensation package, okay? What does that mean? That means if I leave the organization, I'm going to feel pain as an employee. I'm going to leave something on the table. And that something on the table better make me cry, okay? So when we build out these packages, okay, there's different things that you can do to make people feel like they have something at risk, okay? And it's not always hard dollars, but let's just go through these. Number one, and we're going to look at what we call a midterm or long-term incentive plan. It's very basic, and it's going to have a vesting schedule attached to each award. Non-solicitation agreements, they kind of keep people honest. And, I love this because my partner, Charlie, who's Christy's mate, 6'7", great guy, they owned the pup store growing up in Gaston, Alabama, okay? And had a glass door, and he was working as there a kid, and he remembers asking his dad one time, said, "Dad, why do we lock the door at night? Because all they have to do is break the glass and get in." He said, "Son, we lock the door not to keep the bad guys out, but to keep the honest people honest." And that's what some of these agreements do, okay? NDAs may need to be important. Let me tell you my favorite of all time agreement, and that's a double trigger change of control. Now, I'm not an attorney, but just so we're on the same page, double trigger is a change of control has to happen and I have to get terminated, okay? So two things have to happen in order for me to get paid. Now, I'm going to pick on lenders for a minute. Most lenders, okay, they're gunslingers, and they have, they're great, but they got egos, there's, whatever. And they want to know, am I protected? That's what they want to know, okay? This is a great tool to use to say, of course you're going to be protected. If you get terminated, we'll pay you one-time salary. Well, why is somebody else typically buying another organization? They may want the executives and some technology and branches, but they also want the lenders. So rarely ever do these get paid out. It's a beautiful thing, okay? So this can give incredible peace of mind with zero impact to your bottom line. Non-competes, the Chevron doctrine and all that's they're saying it's a no-no with DOL. However, if it's a true non-compete and it's with the right executives, there's all these little ifs, ands, and buts. I like non-competes as long as it's a true non-compete. And again, it has to be for appropriate level, okay? And I know this is being challenged with the DOL right now. I'm not an attorney, but it's still a great tool. And then, we did talk about stay bonuses. This is an absolute must. But again, you got to know who's paying for it.
How much are they to be meaningful to make it work? Is it a percentage of its pay?
I think it depends, but I'd say 6 months,
We've usually done them based on tenure. So how long you've been with the company, essentially to a severance agreement, you kind of go, okay, how much would that be and how much would it, because it's a contract, it's an exchange, right?
That's right.
So it has to be worth something.
That's right.
Yeah. But
pay out after a year or 2 years or 3 years, or if you'll stay, how long?
It depends on how long you think the transaction will take. If it's shorter, like a smaller credit, maybe not so long, but if it's a lot longer for a larger one, then you just keep them. Or if you think, hey, this is done, but we know we need them, we're buying in X, and we know this big deal, you're gonna hold on to them longer. It really just depends. And just as a side note on stay, just because we have to start people, if anybody in here is going through a core conversion, get your stay bonuses in, because you don't want to lose them in the middle. But, yeah, but for us, I've always done it just based on the individual's tenure with the company, 20 years, 30 years, and then of course, risk to the company. Goodwill, how long, do they need to keep their team there? Skill level, what's their skill?
That's right.
And I like the non-solicitation, absolutely. Don't give something and not get something.
That's right.
On that change of control, you call it a double trigger,
Double trigger.
which means, because, I've actually seen one here that I'm dealing with where the change of control, whoever's gonna pay out, whether it's gonna look at it as them or us, even though we're still keeping those people. And you're saying that probably it wasn't us, but that wasn't a well-written.
There's arguments so that's called a single trigger. Okay, so single trigger is change of control happens, you get paid out. Okay, double trigger is 2 events have to happen. And then there's a modified single trigger. And again, I'm not an attorney with all this. So again, so I gotta, corporate will kick me if I don't, give all the 1,000 disclaimers. But, there's arguments to both of them on, some attorneys just like the single trigger, right? And because it gives again, it can give some flexibility negotiation. Again, I'm a double trigger guy, right? Because I always kind of sit on the side of the bank, right, or the credit union. If you're going to keep your job, right? Are you hurt? I don't know. Now, and within those agreements, a lot of times there's diminished roles, and also, there's all these qualifications. I can't, you can't be a senior lender and now I'm going to put you on, the teller line, right? If I do that, well, now I breached the contract and, I've got to pay out. Okay, so there is some protecting language to the employee to make sure that, the role's not diminished. Does that make sense?
On the state bonuses, did they assume they won't have a job after that state bonus?
No, the state bonus is to say, well, it depends. I'll let you answer.
No, well, I was going to say, it does depend. So, particularly for those that are going to be terminated, but you need them to get you through, you need to make sure you have a stay bonus in place for them. And, again, I know most community banks, most credit unions are going to do the right thing to try to help them find another position, right? Because that's just who you are as a culture, right? But to give them 6 months when they walk out the door, say, hey, thanks for doing what you did, or a year, whatever that number is, that needs to be paid, at that point in time. The other stay bonuses, I wouldn't classify it as a stay bonus if they're staying on as an employee. There may be it's a retention bonus, conversion bonus, whatever you want to call it, because they're working 80 hours a week, right? And so all those need to be considered.
One severance, one is a work stay bonus.
That's right.
To stay to the transit. But we do stay bonuses for, like I said, to conversions and things like that, when we say it's so critical we cannot leave you. So at no-goes or certain parts of the process, we'll pay you a little bit of money along the way.
That's right.
Because if the transaction takes a very long time, they're going to get disenfranchised if it's going to take them a year to get whatever this is. So we've done them just chunks at a time, like 90 days, 6 months, whatever that is, and it usually will build up over time. And then severance is completely different.
That's right. All right, lift out, M&A. So we all know, look, I was talking to HR director this morning, and I made the comment, it's easier to do a lift out than it is an M&A. It doesn't mean it's easy. So I want to make that perfectly. It's just as hard because you got to get the right people, but we are seeing a lot of lift outs happen, as y'all are, okay? So this goes back to having at-risk compensation, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Right people, right market means big dollars to whatever, to your organization, okay? And it's all driven by the people. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I just want to reiterate it. Now, we're hearing a lot about, technology and branch dependency, and, I love going to branches, okay? Because my dogs get a treat and I get a sucker. So I go about once a week. JP Morgan is building branches. Bank of America is building branches. So I always find it interesting. I just make that side comment. Look, I'm not a consultant to banks and, profitability and growth and all that. I'm an executive benefits guy, okay? But we get brought in on some really crazy conversations. And here's what I'll tell you. I believe that the right people with the right branch, you'll make a lot of money. That's just my personal opinion, okay? And look, I'm a branch, I told you, I'm a branch guy, okay? So I push back on banks that say we don't need them, okay? You might not need them everywhere, but you need them. Now, when I start talking about HR, right, back to the value you can bring, okay? If you have a great relationship with an investment banker, this is where you can pick up great people. So, M&A deals, when a big guy buys a little guy, okay, or when a credit union buys a bank, there are tremendous displacements happening in every one of those transactions. Find out who they are, go get them, because they want a job, I promise you. If there's executive turnover, C-level, undoubtedly, there are going to be people that want to leave. Reach out to them. You know, it's amazing to me, you know, how many people, and again, I know there's certain rules, you're not supposed to go hire from your friend. Look, I think all that's changed, okay? We're living in a completely different world, and I see banks 5 minutes down the road getting other people from, you know, their friends effectively, right? And again, I'm not right or wrong, whatever, we're just living in a different world. So, and it's really about the value they bring and, you know, what people want to do and what they accomplish, and have a relationship with those individuals. Charlie and I call them event banks. We know something's going to happen. We don't know what or when, but we want a relationship with them when it does, because there we can add some value. If there's a capital raise at a bank, huge opportunity, particularly if they're bringing an activist, because if they bring an activist, what are they going to do? Sell the bank. Bingo, right? So again, just keep an eye on these. Your best sources for this are investment bankers. They know what's going on. Have a relationship with them. Go to lunch with them. Grab a cocktail, whatever, with your team. Have them come in. Maintain a relationship and ask them, you know, what's going on, right? And just say, hey, look, just keep an eye out for me if you're looking for a certain individual, okay? It's amazing what's out there. All right. We talked about this. Really, at the end of the day, you know, there needs to be at-risk compensation, okay? And so let's talk about that just for a quick minute. If this is an Excel, there's no products, there's nothing involved with this, okay? This is a promise to pay effectively. Book entry only, we're not even moving money. If your organization doesn't have a plan like this in place, I highly recommend you get one. I'm gonna walk through it so we're all on the same page, okay? It's very simple. This will be performance-based. I have an executive, he or she's, 55, and I'm just kind of showing how this would operate. Making $100,000 a year, there's a little salary growth in there. My contribution to my account every year, my award opportunity, let's just say it's 25%, okay? Again, performance-based, whatever that looks like. There's a 3-year cliff vesting schedule. What does that mean? Each year vest independently. I don't want to be elementary on this, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. What does that mean? Year 1 vest on the first day of year 4, year 2 on the first day of year 5, etc. So, and we're going to tie my account balance to the ROE of the bank, right? Or multiple ROA, or, we're going to put some caps and floors in there, but we're going to give them a little movement on their account balance. So here's what happens. In years 1, 2, and 3, I do everything that I'm supposed to do. I get a contribution in my account, book entry only. Again, I'm not moving money, book entry only into my, incentive liability account. At the end of 3 years, in column 7, I have $83,000 sitting out there in my account. I've earned it, but I'm not vested in it, okay? So if I walk out the door, that's what I leave on the table. If I made a bad loan, right, that didn't go bad for 3 years, I'm gonna go claw some of that incentive back, okay? If somebody comes to recruit me, this is what I'm leaving on the table, right? So again, it needs to be enough to influence your behavior, okay? Now, if I continue to do everything I'm supposed to do, on the first day of year 4, I'm gonna get my year 1, $25,000, that's grown at 7%, and I'm gonna get a check for $30,000 and change. Now, I owe tax on that point in time, which is fine, I got the cash, and I can take my net and go do whatever I want with it, right? Additionally, I've done everything I'm supposed to do, so my account balance grew a little bit. So this is a great tool to maintain teeth in key employees. And this isn't just commercial lenders, by the way. IT, compliance, HR, right? So this can get applied to those key executives, those key employees, right? Call them executive, key employees. Does that make sense? Super simple. Now, the great news is this falls outside of what we call Internal Revenue Code Section 49A. So that means I've got a lot of flexibility here. Okay, this falls under what they call the short-term deferral rules. And that means that you can kind of do whatever you want. Okay, so it's a lot of fun. All right. Now, you can also pair this, and again, we're doing this with a bank right now in Alabama. They're saying we have some younger executives that we want to keep. We said, have you asked them what's important to them? They said no. Well, they've got kids going to college in 4 years. They said, we don't know how we're going to pay for it. So we put the vesting at 4 years, and they were like blown away. So, they're going to have money to pay for college. It's amazing, right? And it's the little things that you can do to tailor this to whatever it is that you need to tailor. And again, you don't want to get crazy on the administration side, but very, very flexible, very easy. So I'm going to hit pause there. Any questions?
Question. So did I hear you say that you could include something performance related in that?
You can.
So like you said, maybe it's a commercial lender, they're, some type of degradation in their portfolio or something to that effect?
Yep, you'd have a little clawback in there. Yep. You ding them. And all that's in the plan document,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's all established.
That's right. So, if you do this, you get X. If something happens, I'm going to dock you, right?
You can use these too. It's a lot of pensions are closing right now, or freezing, and those types of things. And new executives come in and they don't have a retirement. This is a really good replacement for those individuals, whether it be, and this is a non-qualified plan, so you can choose who you want to give it to. It's not like you're in a 401k or pension where everybody has to be treated the same. These are non-qualified, so you can pick and choose who you want to have on there. Now, there's still equity issues and things that
You got everybody talks, so you have to be careful with all that.
that's
Yep.
what it is. But I found that these are really good too when you have pros in your plan maybe, or you have somebody else coming in, so that they feel like they're getting the same typical treatment. Or if you tier your benefits on your pension based on years, you can make up what that particular cost is. And then there's a whole back end of this of how to fund it, and that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's 100%. Now, I'm going to put you on payroll. So, this is, you mentioned about pensions. Pensions have gone away, right? And everybody wants some sort of lifetime benefit. Is that fair? Okay, now, who's here heard of BOLI? None of this has anything to do with BOLI. Thank God. Okay. Now, this is effectively a non-qualified deferred compensation plan, okay? And again, the strategy here is, is a specialized annuity asset that delivers a lifetime benefit for less cost. Super neat. If y'all have deferred compensation, if you're exploring deferred compensation, if you're trying to find out what to do for, executives, this may be a great, solution, or it may not be. But it's worth exploring. And I'm going to pick on Executive 3 really quick. You have a 50-year-old retirement at 65. Now, this works different for credit unions, okay? But, for a bank, if they were to receive $50,000 a year for 15 years as their retirement benefit, I'm going to have a cost of $750,000. Pretty basic math, 50 times 15. That's what I'm ultimately expensing, okay? Under the annuity methodology, you go out and you buy an annuity for $465,000, okay? That becomes my expense. So now I've got opportunity cost loss because I have to outlay the $465,000, so that's kind of the downside. But the upside is I'm saving almost 40% in the expense of the plan because I don't have to expense $750. The accounting rules say I only have to expense $465, and I get a lifetime benefit. So I'm going to collect, assuming, I live to be a white collar, executive, and, that's going to be 85, 86, 88, 89 if you're a female. I'm going to collect an additional $300,000. So the organization's expensing less, I'm getting more. And you go, well, how much would that cost me, right? Well, for the average service period, while employed, it would cost a 50-year-old about, $23,000 a year in additional comp expense, okay? This is incredibly powerful right? Now again, this is non-qualified, so we have ERISA and top hat limitations, so we got 409A now that we have to bring in, so there's some complexities that go along with any type of non-qualified deferred comp plan, okay, if it falls outside the short-term deferral rules. But this is a great solution to bring in some pension-type planning and fund it differently than bank-owned life insurance, okay? This actually reduces the benefit expense. It's really, really cool. And we can thank the accounting rules for that. So, pension accounting rules, in fact.
Are you able to speak to why it's different for credit unions? Is there several in here?
Yes. Credit unions. Once the risk of forfeiture lapses, okay, as it relates to your ability to receive a benefit, so if there's no longer risk of forfeiture, the individuals are taxed on those payments whether or not they're in receipt of them. So the way it would work different than credit unions, instead of an executive receiving $750,000 in a one-time check, they would receive an annuity asset worth $465,000. Now you owe tax on it at that point in time, so that's the stinky part, but you got a basis in it and you still get a lifetime benefit. Now, since there are some credit unions in here, how many of y'all have the split dollar plans? Loan regime, okay. Have any of y'all tested them out 30 and 40 years?
We don't have a split and we got rid of it.
Okay. You got rid of the split dollars? Yeah. So what we're, and again, you know, there's a couple of states out there that don't like them by the regulators. You know, Georgia hadn't banned them, but they don't like them. We talk to the regulators quite often. I think Pennsylvania, they got a little issue with them. You know, federally you're fine. You can do whatever you want to do. But if you're walking down the path of using loan regime split dollar type structures, I would just encourage you to explore all the options that you have out there, because the interest rates have completely flipped how a lot of these plans operate. And it's just important, again, we're all salespeople, right? So, you know, I've got my dog food that I sell, and, you know, we do a whole bunch of stuff, but it's really important that you understand how these plans operate long term. Because a lot of people sell the sizzle, right? But on the backside, you got some potential, you know, risk exposure that may not be known at the time that the plan's implemented. Okay, so takeaways. Real simple here. You know, back to the basics. Have a repository with all your plans, okay? Have that census information updated a couple of times a year. Make sure anytime you have somebody come new with an employment agreement or whatever it is, it's just added to that repository. Really simple to make sure you have your documents in place for your organization, so if something comes up, you're on top of it, right? Sit down with the executives and the board, right? Particularly as it relates to, you know, who owes what, you know, seller versus buyer, what's happening in the executive benefit space with 280G. Again, these are, and I hate to say it, but these are the things that really get deals going sideways when you start talking about executive comp. And again, it's because of a lot of the assumptions that are made and assumed by investment bankers on the front side. I love at-risk compensation. Make sure it's sitting in there for your key executives. And then at the end of the day, get a relationship with an investment banker and stay alert to what's happening in your, in your geographical area where you're trying to go, okay? Because every time there's an M&A transaction, that's an opportunity. And with that, I'm done. Any questions? Easy as pie. So many questions.
Can you talk just a little bit about the difference between lift out and then just a little bit more about lift outs?
A little bit more about lift outs. Lift outs, where I'm going to go get a commercial lending team, right? And I'm going to lift them out from one bank and bring them to mine.
Okay, so it's just basically.
That's it.
But that's not negotiated with the other organization. That's just taking the people.
That's just taking the people.
You can do that.
Yeah.
Get rid of the whole-
No one
Oh, absolutely.
happening and going
Branch
after
or something, you actually lift out.
No, it's not a friendly. It's.
Oh, it's not friendly.
No. That's not what you're negotiating. That's what I wanted to clarify too.
Oh, okay.
No, it's basically you still here.
The whole.
The whole team.
And usually if you get
Are you
one
going out
and they're all unhappy, you can pretty
places
much
that are
pull the
in
rest
flux,
of them.
like maybe there's already, they've announced that they're selling or not necessarily?
Could. Absolutely. Depends on what, this goes back to the strategic direction of your bank, right? If you're sitting in this area and I say, you know what, I want to go up here, right? You're going to go look for the right team, up here, you're not just gonna go build a branch, right? Is that fair?
Right.
So you're gonna open up an LPO, and so you're gonna go get whatever team up there that you want. And then once you get that team, it's really important that you have the right comp around them with the at-risk, okay? So they just can't walk out at any point in time. They want to walk out. Again, you want them to feel pain if they leave you.
What was that organization, AOBA? How are you spelling that?
AOBA, acquired or be acquired.
Oh, okay, everybody.
Yeah. So you're familiar. Look, and again, I just recommend, and again, this isn't necessarily, you know, this is again, once you go, you kind of get the gist of it, okay? But it's really good. And it's really funny because there's a bank investor named Ken Lehman. I don't know if anybody's heard that name. He's got his own department at FDIC. He's a great, great, great guy. But, you know, I asked Ken one time, I said, Ken, is this any good for you? He said, JR, he said, you've got bankers talking about legal issues. You got attorneys talking about accounting issues. And you got accountants talking about banking issues, something like that. He says, terrible. Right? But I'll say this. We got one of our bankers to go. He came out after the first 2 sessions and he said, I already got my money's worth. So again, to go once every 5 years or 3 years, you know, if there's some influx going on within the industry, it's good to go because you will pick up some very relevant data for your organization, credit unions and banks alike. I'm good.
That was awesome.
Thank you, Christy.